The sparks flew like fireworks as Sheriff Corinne's pristine white Tesla died right there in my driveway. Smoke poured from under the hood while she screamed at me, her face red with rage and disbelief. She had no idea that the sweet little electrical outlet she had been stealing power from for months was now her worst nightmare. As she frantically tried to restart her dead car, I stood there with my coffee, watching $20,000 of entitled arrogance go up in smoke. She looked at me with pure hatred and said the words that still give me chills. "You have no idea what you just did to yourself." But the truth was, I knew exactly what I had done. My name is Mike, and I have lived in Cedar Falls my entire life. This is one of those small towns where everyone knows everyone, where you wave at strangers and leave your doors unlocked. I am an electrician by trade, and I take pride in keeping our little community powered and safe. My house sits on Maple Street, nothing fancy, but I built it with my own hands 20 years ago. I installed outdoor electrical outlets on my driveway because I work out of my garage workshop. Sometimes I need to run power tools outside, and it made sense to have the convenience. I never thought those outlets would become the center of a war with the most corrupt person I have ever met. Sheriff Karen Martinez had been in town for about 2 years when this story begins. She came from the city with big ideas about modernizing our police force. The first thing she did was trade in the old patrol cars for a brand new Tesla Model S pure white, gleaming chrome, and silent as death when it rolled down Main Street. Karen was tall, always in a perfectly pressed uniform, with dark hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. She carried herself like she owned the world, and in many ways she did own our little corner of it. The badge on her chest was not just a symbol of authority. It was a weapon she used to get whatever she wanted. I first met Corinne at the grocery store on a Tuesday morning. She was complaining loudly to the manager about the lack of electric car charging stations in town. I happened to be standing nearby, and I made the mistake of being neighborly. "Excuse me, Sheriff," I said. "I could not help but overhear. I am an electrician, and if you need somewhere to charge your car, I have outlets at my house. You are welcome to use them any time." She turned and looked at me with those cold gray eyes. For a moment, I thought she was going to ignore me completely. Then she smiled, but it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted easy prey. "That is very kind of you," she said. "I might just take you up on that offer." 2 days later, I came home from work to find tire tracks in my driveway and my electric meter spinning like a carnival ride. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe Karen had used my outlet once and forgotten to mention it. But when my electricity bill arrived 3 weeks later, I knew something was wrong. The number on that bill made my hands shake. It was nearly double what I normally paid. I started paying attention. Every morning when I left for work, my driveway was empty. Every evening when I returned, there were fresh tire tracks leading right up to my outlet. Someone was using my electricity while I was gone, and they were using a lot of it. I decided to install a small security camera pointed at my driveway. What I saw on that footage made my blood boil. Every single day, like clockwork, Sheriff Karen would pull into my driveway in her Tesla. She would get out, plug in her car, and then sit in my lawn chair while it charged. She would make phone calls, eat lunch, and even take naps. She was treating my property like her personal charging station. The worst part was how comfortable she looked. She would wave at neighbors walking by, as if she owned the place. Sometimes she would even bring paperwork and use my outdoor table like it was her office. She had turned my driveway into her personal workspace, and she was billing me for the privilege. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I had to be careful. This was the sheriff, after all. I could not just march up to her and start a fight. I decided to approach it diplomatically. The next time I saw her car in my driveway, I walked over with a friendly smile. "Hey there, Sheriff," I said. "I noticed you have been using my outlet to charge your car. I am happy to help, but I was wondering if we could work out some kind of arrangement. My electric bill has been pretty high lately." Karen looked up from her phone with an expression that could freeze lava. She did not say a word for a long moment. Then she stood up, towering over me in her boots and hat. "Is that so?" she said, her voice like ice. "Well, let me tell you something, Mike. This Tesla is not just my personal vehicle. It is an official patrol car for the Cedar Falls Police Department. When I charge it here, I am providing a service to this community. I am keeping you and your neighbors safe with clean, quiet, efficient law enforcement." I stood there, stunned by her audacity. She was actually trying to convince me that stealing my electricity was some kind of public service. "I understand that, Sheriff," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But the electricity is not free. I still have to pay for it." Karen stepped closer, and I could smell her perfume mixed with the metallic scent of her badge and gun. "Community support is part of living in a small town, Mike," she said. "I would think someone like you would understand that. After all, you want to be a good neighbor, do not you?" The way she said it was not a question. It was a threat wrapped in a smile. Within a week, Karen had escalated the situation beyond anything I could have imagined. It was not just her Tesla anymore. She had given my address to every deputy in the county, and they were all using my driveway like a public charging station. I would come home to find 3 or 4 police vehicles plugged into my outlets, their owners nowhere to be seen. The worst part was that they were not just charging their cars. They were using my property as a break room. I found coffee cups, fast food wrappers, and cigarette butts scattered around my driveway. One deputy had even moved my lawn furniture to make room for his motorcycle. When I tried to confront them, they would just badge me and walk away. "Official police business," they would say, as if that explained everything. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. My electric bill for that month was a nightmare. It had tripled. I was looking at nearly $600 just to power other people's vehicles. I could barely afford my mortgage, let alone subsidize the entire police department's transportation costs. I decided to try talking to Corinne again, but this time I was not going to be so diplomatic. I found her at the police station and asked to speak with her privately. "Sheriff Martinez," I said, "this situation has gotten out of hand. I cannot afford to pay for everyone's electricity. I need you to stop using my property." Karen leaned back in her chair and studied me like I was some kind of interesting insect. "Mike," she said, "I think you are misunderstanding the nature of community service. When the police department saves money on fuel costs, that means lower taxes for everyone. You should be thanking me, not complaining." "But I am the one paying for it," I said. "Not the community, me, out of my own pocket." "Are you refusing to cooperate with law enforcement?" Karen asked, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. That question hit me like a punch to the gut. I realized that she was not just stealing my electricity. She was setting me up. If I refused to let her use my property, she could claim I was obstructing justice. If I complained too loudly, she could find reasons to arrest me. 2 days later, Karen pulled me over for allegedly running a stop sign. I knew for a fact that I had come to a complete stop, but her word against mine meant nothing. She took her time writing the ticket, making sure I understood that this was just the beginning. "You know, Mike," she said as she handed me the citation, "I have been getting complaints about unlicensed electrical work in your neighborhood. I would hate to have to call the building inspector to check on your permits. My permits were all in order, but the threat was clear. She could make my life miserable with inspections, violations, and harassment. The worst part was that she smiled while she said it, like she was doing me a favor by warning me. That night, I sat in my kitchen staring at my electric bill and the traffic ticket. I realized that I was not just dealing with a corrupt sheriff. I was dealing with a system that was designed to protect people like her and punish people like me. The badge, the uniform, the authority, they were all weapons pointed at anyone who dared to stand up to her. But I am an electrician. I understand how power works, and I was about to teach Sheriff Karen that not all power comes from a badge. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning when I opened my electric bill and saw a number that made me physically sick. $847. Nearly $1,000 to power my small house and the growing fleet of police vehicles that had turned my driveway into their personal charging depot. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at that bill with my hands shaking. This was not just theft anymore. This was economic warfare. Karen was systematically destroying my financial stability, and she was doing it with a smile on her face and a badge on her chest. I decided to make one final attempt at reason. I drove to the police station and asked to speak with Karen in her office. She kept me waiting for nearly an hour, which I now realize was deliberate psychological warfare. When she finally agreed to see me, she did not even look up from her computer. "What can I do for you, Mike?" she asked, her voice dripping with fake courtesy. I placed the electric bill on her desk. "This has to stop, Sheriff. I cannot afford to subsidize your entire department. This bill is nearly $1,000. Karen glanced at the bill and shrugged. "Seems like you should have thought about that before you offered to help the community." "I offered to help you," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "Not the entire police force, and certainly not at this cost." "Are you withdrawing your support for law enforcement?" Karen asked, picking up a pen and clicking it repeatedly. "Because I would hate to think that you are trying to obstruct official police business." "This is not official business," I said. "This is theft." The pen stopped clicking. Karen looked up at me with those cold gray eyes, and for a moment I thought she might actually arrest me right there in her office. "Theft is a serious accusation, Mike," she said. "I would be very careful about throwing around words like that, especially when you are talking to the person who decides whether or not to investigate theft claims in this town." The threat was crystal clear. She was telling me that she was above the law and that I had no recourse against her. She was the sheriff, the prosecutor, the judge, and the jury all rolled into one. "If you lock that outlet or try to prevent official police vehicles from using it," Karen continued, "I will cite you for obstruction of justice. If you continue to harass me about this issue, I will find building code violations at your house that will cost you 10 times what you are crying about now." I stood up, my legs shaking with rage and fear. "You cannot do this to people." "I can do whatever I want," Karen said, standing up behind her desk. "I am the sheriff. You are nobody. And if you ever come into my office again with this nonsense, I will make sure you regret it." I walked out of that police station feeling like I had just been mugged. But as I drove home, something changed inside me. The fear was still there, but it was being replaced by something else. Something cold and calculating and patient. I had spent 30 years as an electrician. I knew how to work with power. I knew how to control it, direct it, and yes, weaponize it. Karen thought she held all the cards because she had a badge and a gun. But she had made one crucial mistake. She had declared war on someone who understood electricity better than she understood the law. That night, I went down to my workshop and started researching Tesla charging systems. I pulled out my electrical engineering textbooks and started drawing diagrams. I was no longer thinking like a victim. I was thinking like an engineer, and I was going to build Corinne a surprise that would teach her the most expensive lesson of her life. I spent the next 3 weeks researching everything I could about Tesla charging systems. I read technical manuals, watched YouTube videos, and even called a few contacts in the electric vehicle industry. What I learned gave me hope for the first time in months. Tesla batteries are incredibly sophisticated, but they have one critical vulnerability. They are designed to accept a steady flow of power at specific voltage levels. If you hit them with the wrong kind of electrical surge, you can cause catastrophic damage to the battery management system. The car will not just stop charging, it will be completely disabled. The beauty of this approach was that it would look like a random electrical failure. Tesla batteries are expensive and complex. They fail sometimes, especially when they are charged frequently at high power levels. If Corinne's battery died while plugged into my outlet, it would appear to be a tragic coincidence. I designed a device that I called the Surge Guardian. To anyone looking at it, it appeared to be a standard electrical safety device. It had the same gray metal casing as legitimate surge protectors, complete with official-looking labels and certification stickers. But inside, it was something entirely different. The Surge Guardian was programmed to monitor the electrical load on my circuit. When it detected the specific power signature of a Tesla charging system, it would wait exactly 30 seconds, then deliver a carefully calculated power surge designed to overwhelm the car's battery management system. Building the device took me 2 weeks of careful work in my garage. I used components from legitimate electrical equipment, so nothing would look suspicious if anyone ever examined it. The programming was stored on a simple microcontroller that could be easily removed and destroyed if necessary. The most challenging part was the installation. I had to replace the outlet that Corinne had been using with a new one that was wired through the Surge Guardian. The device itself was hidden inside the electrical panel in my garage, where it looked like just another piece of safety equipment. I waited for a weekend when Corinne was out of town at a sheriff's conference. I had seen the announcement in the local paper, so I knew I had at least 48 hours to complete the installation. I worked carefully and methodically, making sure that everything looked exactly the same as before. The hardest part was not the technical work. It was the psychological preparation. I was about to cross a line that I could never uncross. I was about to fight back against a corrupt system using methods that the system itself had taught me were necessary. I tested the Surge Guardian with smaller devices first. I plugged in a cheap electric drill and watched as the device delivered its calculated surge. The drill died instantly. Its motor burned out beyond repair. The surge was precise and devastating, exactly what I had designed it to be. As I cleaned up my workshop that Sunday night, I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. I had built the perfect trap for Sheriff Corinne's Tesla. It was elegant, untraceable, and completely justified. She had stolen hundreds of dollars worth of electricity from me. Now she was about to pay a price that would make her think twice about ever abusing her power again. I went to bed that night knowing that Monday morning would bring either justice or disaster. Either way, I was ready for it. Monday morning arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that makes small towns look like postcards. I had barely finished my first cup of coffee when I heard the familiar sound of Corinne's Tesla pulling into my driveway. I moved to my kitchen window and watched as she parked in her usual spot, right next to my modified outlet. Karen got out of her car with the same arrogant confidence she always displayed. She wearing her perfectly pressed uniform, her hair pulled back in that tight bun, and her badge gleaming in the morning sun. She walked around to the charging port on her Tesla like she owned the place, which I suppose she thought she did. I held my breath as she unplugged the charging cable and connected it to her car. The connection was smooth and normal. The Tesla's charging indicator light came on, showing that power was flowing to the battery. Karen smiled with satisfaction and walked over to my lawn chair, where she settled in with her phone and a cup of coffee. For 30 seconds, everything was exactly as it had been for the past 3 months. Karen sat in my chair, using my electricity, treating my property like her personal charging station. She had no idea that a timer was counting down in the electrical panel behind her. When the Surge Guardian activated, it was like watching a small lightning storm. The outlet erupted in a shower of sparks that lit up my entire driveway. Karen's Tesla immediately started making sounds I had never heard before. Electronic beeping, clicking, and whirring mixed with the smell of burning plastic and ozone. Karen jumped out of my chair so fast that she knocked over her coffee. "What the hell?" she shouted, staring at the sparks flying from the outlet. The charging cable was still connected to her car, but now it was smoking and sparking like a broken power line. I ran outside, playing the part of the concerned neighbor. "Oh my God, Sheriff, are you okay? What happened?" Karen was frantically trying to disconnect the charging cable, but the Tesla's charging port was locked in place. The car's computer system was in full emergency mode, and it would not release the cable. She pulled and twisted and cursed, but the cable would not budge. "I do not know what happened," Karen said, her voice rising with panic. "The car just started sparking and smoking. There must be something wrong with your outlet." I looked at the outlet, which was now blackened and clearly damaged. "Let me go turn off the power," I said, running to my electrical panel. I flipped the breaker and the sparking stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. When I returned, Karen was staring at her Tesla in horror. The charging port was melted and twisted. The dashboard was completely dark. The car was not just disabled, it was dead. "Try starting it," I suggested, knowing full well what would happen. Karen pressed the start button, but nothing happened. She tried again and again and again. The Tesla sat there like a $20,000 paperweight. No lights, no sounds, no response at all. "This is not possible," Karen said, her voice breaking. "This car is brand new. It cannot just die like this." "Maybe it was an electrical surge," I said, trying to sound helpful. "Sometimes when power fluctuates, it can damage sensitive electronics. I have seen it happen with computers and televisions." Karen turned to look at me, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked vulnerable. Her perfect uniform was wrinkled, her hair was falling out of its bun, and her hands were shaking. "This is going to cost me a fortune," she whispered. "The battery alone is worth $15,000. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered my electric bills, the threats, the traffic tickets, and the months of abuse. My sympathy evaporated like morning dew. "I am really sorry this happened, Sheriff," I said. "Maybe your insurance will cover it." Karen looked at me with a mixture of suspicion and desperation. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out if this was somehow my fault. But the evidence was clear. Her car had been plugged into my outlet when it died. Any reasonable person would assume it was an electrical accident. "I need to call a tow truck," Karen said, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. As I watched her make that call, I felt a satisfaction deeper than anything I had experienced in years. Justice was not always served in courtrooms. Sometimes it was served by a skilled electrician with the right tools and the patience to use them. Within an hour, my driveway was full of people. The tow truck driver, two deputies, an insurance investigator, and even the fire chief showed up to examine the scene. Karen had turned my property into a crime scene, complete with yellow tape and official photographs. I stood on my front porch, playing the role of the innocent homeowner whose electrical system had malfunctioned. Several neighbors had gathered to watch the spectacle, and I could hear them whispering about the sheriff's bad luck. The insurance investigator was a thin man in a cheap suit who took photographs of everything. He measured the outlet, tested the voltage, and examined the burned charging cable. When he was finished, he approached Karen with a clipboard full of forms. "I have good news and bad news, Sheriff," he said. "The good news is that this appears to be a random electrical failure. No evidence of sabotage or deliberate damage. The bad news is that your insurance policy does not cover electrical surges from external sources." Karen's face went white. "What do you mean it does not cover it?" "Power surges from outside your vehicle are considered acts of God or environmental hazards," the investigator explained. "Your policy covers collisions, theft, and internal mechanical failures. But if your car is damaged by someone else's electrical system, that is not our responsibility." "But this is not my electrical system," Karen protested, pointing at me. "This is his house, his outlet, his problem." The investigator shrugged. "Then you will need to file a claim against his homeowner's insurance. But I should warn you, most policies have specific exclusions for electrical damage to vehicles. It is a very gray area legally." I watched Karen's world crumble in real time. Not only was her car destroyed, but she was going to have to pay for the repairs herself. The Tesla's battery and charging system would cost at least $20,000 to replace, assuming it could be repaired at all. Deputy Williams, one of Karen's regular charging customers, approached me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "Mike, has your electrical system ever had problems before?" "Never," I said honestly. "I installed this system myself, and it has been rock solid for 20 years. I have no idea what could have caused this. Maybe the Tesla drew too much power for the circuit to handle." "Teslas charge at standard voltage levels," Deputy Williams said. "They should not overload a residential circuit." "Well, something caused it," I said, gesturing at the burned outlet. "Maybe there was a power surge from the grid. Maybe the transformer down the street is having problems. I really do not know." The fire chief finished his inspection and approached our group. "The outlet is destroyed, and the breaker tripped like it was supposed to," he announced. "No fire hazard, no code violations. Just looks like an electrical accident to me." Karen overheard this and stormed over. "Accident?" she demanded. "My $20,000 car is destroyed and you are calling it an accident." "Sometimes electronics fail, Sheriff," the fire chief said calmly. "It is unfortunate, but it happens. The important thing is that nobody was hurt." As the investigators packed up their equipment, I could see Karen's anger building. She was staring at me with pure hatred, as if she could see right through my act. But anger is not evidence, and suspicion is not proof. "I want your electrical system inspected," Karen told me. "If there is something wrong with your house, you are going to pay for this." "Of course, Sheriff," I said. "I want to get to the bottom of this as much as you do. I will call an electrician first thing tomorrow." The next day, I called my friend Danny, who owned the largest electrical contracting company in the county. Danny brought his entire crew to inspect my house from top to bottom. They tested every circuit, examined every outlet, and verified that my entire system was up to code. "Your electrical system is perfect, Mike," Danny announced in front of Corinne and two deputies. "Better than most houses in town, actually. Whatever happened to that car, it was not caused by your wiring." Corinne's face was a mask of frustration and rage. She had been so sure that she could prove I was responsible, but every expert who examined the scene reached the same conclusion. It was an accident, a random electrical failure that could have happened to anyone. But the real victory was yet to come. Word of Corinne's misfortune was spreading through town like wildfire, and people were starting to ask uncomfortable questions about why the sheriff had been using a private citizen's electricity in the first place. The town council meeting 3 weeks later was standing room only. Word had spread about Corinne's unauthorized use of my electricity, and the community was not happy about it. The meeting was supposed to be about budget approvals, but everyone wanted to talk about police misconduct. I sat in the back row, watching as citizen after citizen stood up to express their concerns. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the local diner, was the first to speak. "I want to know why our sheriff thinks it is acceptable to steal electricity from private citizens," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "If Corinne Martinez needs to charge her car, she should pay for it like the rest of us." "It was not theft," Corinne protested from her seat in the front row. "It was community cooperation. The Tesla is an official police vehicle." "Paid for with whose money?" asked Tom Bradley, the local mechanic. "And since when does community cooperation mean helping yourself to other people's property without permission?" The questions kept coming, and Corinne's answers kept getting weaker. She tried to frame her actions as public service, but the community was not buying it. They saw it for what it was: abuse of power by someone who thought she was above the law. Mayor Davidson finally called for order. "Sheriff Martinez," he said, "the council has received several complaints about your conduct. We need to discuss this matter formally." What followed was a public dressing down that I would not have wished on my worst enemy. The council members took turns expressing their disappointment in Corinne's behavior. They questioned her judgment, her ethics, and her fitness to serve as sheriff. "The badge is a symbol of trust," said Councilwoman Roberts. "When you abuse that trust, you damage the entire law enforcement community." Corinne sat there, her face red with humiliation, as the people she was supposed to serve told her exactly what they thought of her. It was a complete reversal of power. For months, she had used fear and intimidation to control people. Now she was the one being controlled. The council voted unanimously to censure Corinne and to launch a formal investigation into her conduct. They also voted to install electric vehicle charging stations at the police station, so that officers would never again have an excuse to use private property. But the real justice came in the form of Corinne's repair bill. The Tesla's battery and charging system were completely destroyed. The estimate for repairs was $23,000, more than Corinne made in 6 months. Her personal car insurance refused to cover the damage, and my homeowner's insurance found no evidence of negligence on my part. Corinne was forced to take out a personal loan to pay for the repairs. She would be making payments for the next 5 years, a constant reminder of the price of corruption. 6 months later, Corinne resigned from the sheriff's department and moved away from Cedar Falls. She never found out that I was responsible for destroying her car, but I think she suspected. Sometimes, when I walked past her in town during those final weeks, she would look at me with a mixture of hatred and respect. The new sheriff, a local man named Bill Patterson, came to my house personally to apologize for Corinne's behavior. What she did was wrong, he told me. It will never happen again under my watch. I thanked him, but I also made sure to mention that my electrical system was very sensitive to unauthorized use. I have learned to be much more careful about who I allow to use my property, I said. Bill nodded and smiled. I understand completely. We will be using the new charging stations at the police station from now on. As I write this story, my electric bill is back to normal. My driveway is my own again. And justice has been served, one perfectly calculated electrical surge at a time. Sometimes the system fails to hold corrupt people accountable. Sometimes badges and uniforms protect the guilty instead of the innocent. But sometimes, if you are patient and skilled and determined enough, you can find a way to make things right. Karen Martinez learned that power comes in many forms, and that some people know how to use it better than others. She also learned that stealing electricity from an electrician is like stealing fire from a dragon. You might get away with it for a while, but eventually, you are going to get burned.